Dustin Dopirak from the Indy Stars with us, along with Dustin Schutte, as always. Man, college athletics over the weekend was crazy.
Yeah.
Basketball and football, it was a cornucopia of incredible games with the rivalry week of football coinciding with this Phil Knight tournament, which was incredible. Some great games in that. My gosh, we've got Purdue now is to me a co-favorite in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
There's no way to say that's not true.
Yep.
And man, I guess we'll start with that. Purdue, how good are they looking right now? Because they've got a freshman point guard in Braden Smith that is playing very well. You've got good pieces around him. Mason Gillis, who's got experience. Waddell. Who I'm missing? Somebody. There's another one besides Mount Edey there in the center. Fletcher Lawyer.
Yep.
All these Indiana kids. But man, they're playing pretty solid right now.
Can I just interject one thing really quick? In that,
Please
if
do.
I have to hear Jay Billis make another freaking lawyer joke, I mean, nonstop throughout the entire tournament. All right.
Well, he gets to do it twice because his brother plays for what?
I know.
Davidson?
That reminds me too. I don't know if you're watching or listening to the TV broadcast for Indiana Purdue, but I don't know how many times the color guy referred to one of Purdue's players as a bar of soap.
I did not hear
recall?
that.
Okay, well, if everyone else missed that, but it was about 4 or 5 times. But I wanted to throw that.
I gotcha.
I missed that.
So I mean, obviously, I've been I've experienced these Purdue beginnings, in bits and pieces because I mean the last 2 games have been played either during or right after Pacers games. So basically, like the Duke, I saw the Duke score, I don't know, the third quarter yesterday. I was like, what? Like what happened? Or actually, it was probably after the game. And then I look at this that score, and I'm like, are you serious? Like, they're not just beating Duke, but they're just stuffing Duke. I mean, so I was like, okay, how is this happening? And it's pretty, I don't want to say it's not surprising at all, but I mean, because it's definitely surprising, but it's just like, obviously the big thing is that the 2 freshman guards are growing up a lot faster. And for whatever reason, they seem to fit, what Matt Painter wants. And which is, I sort of hate to see this team do better than last year's team because there was just so much talent on that and a lot of good guys, between Ivy and Stefanovic and, it's guys that I got to cover when I was at the Athletic, Travion Williams and Eric Hunter. And those are really, really good dudes. And Ivy was a special talent. And it's going to be really weird if you see a situation where they're better off without Ivy and Williams. But they might be. Just because of how this team shapes together, and it just seems to fit more directly. It just seems to be more of a Matt Painter team that just really fits what he wants to do. It's got really good pieces, a bunch of guys that are going to be good at filling a role. Ethan Morton's got 31 assists in 6 games. I mean, like he was a guy that was sort of slow to get a big role, but, Painter always said he was the best, passer he ever recruited. I mean, I remember when he was coming out of Pittsburgh, great dude and had been a phenomenal player out there at Butler High School. And he's been terrific, just running some offense and making some big passes. Braden, I think Braden Smith has played above his head. Brandon Newman is shooting the ball reasonably well. But Edey's just been an absolute beast. And I didn't know what was going to happen when you took Williams away and just made him be the guy all the time. And I'm sure that there are still going to be scenarios where he struggles. Because obviously he's just a huge human, and if you get him in pick and rolls, you can get him on skates. And so there's going to be areas where you're gonna be like, whoa, that's an issue. But man, around the rim, he's just a massive presence. He's just such a big rebounder. He's come so far. I mean, like, I remember when he was recruited, I wrote a story about him. Like, nobody knew who he was because he'd barely played any basketball. And that wasn't because he hadn't been like introduced to it. He actively avoided basketball until he was a sophomore in high school. Like, he did not want to play because he thought that's what people make you do when you're big. Like he played hockey and baseball. Like he actively avoided basketball until someone was like, "Hey, can you play on my rec league team? Like, can you just do that? You know, like is it that much to ask?" And he showed up, was like, "Wow, I actually like this." And then some people saw him like, you know, you could probably play this like at least in college and possibly professionally. You know, if you put literally any effort forth in whatsoever, because you're huge. And now he's what's he averaging? This is totally insane. 21, almost 22 points and 12 rebounds a game, and he's shooting 61.5% from the field, and he's shooting 75.6% from the line, which is kind of a big deal. Just incredible what he's doing, and he's just a force, and it's hard to move him. So I mean, like, you know, he puts away Drew Timme, he puts away Armando Bacot. I mean, like now all those guys that you were thinking, like two of those guys that were like everybody's All-Americans, he's already outplayed. So he's got a chance to be the guy in college basketball this year.
Well, you mentioned something about you know, this team potentially being better than last season, and it's still early, so we don't know how this is going to all play out. But at the same time, I remember thinking to myself when I heard what Matt Painter said at Big Ten Media Days, I was like, "Ooh, he's on a bit of a mission this year," because he made two comments that stood out to me. You know, we thought we were good enough to win our league. We thought we were good enough to win the Big Ten tournament, and we thought we were good enough to make the Final Four. We didn't do any of it. Yeah. And he said at Purdue, we pride ourselves on our production outweighing our talent. And last year, our talent outperformed our production. And to me, I just felt like he was on a mission to get back to kind of that formula that he had set up. You know, we're not going to have the most talented team. We're not going to have the team that everybody thinks is going to be one of the best in the country, but we're going to defend well. We're going to pass the ball and everything. Like you said, the pieces fit together. So last year, Purdue played really well in the preseason. They beat Villanova early. They ran North Carolina out of the gym, and everybody thought they were the best team in the country. Looks like they're pretty darn good this season, but it's still early. Teams are still finding their footing. We'll see how this goes, but I do think no matter where this team finishes, I think Purdue's going to be a lot better than where anybody would have thought because of the pieces they lost from last season.
You know, I think another thing is that team, that team was not a great defensive team. It wasn't last year. I mean, that was really the issue. Like there were several guys that were better on offense than they were on defense. You know, several guys. And so that's the tough piece to it. They you know, Jaden Ivey was a much better offensive player than he was a defensive player. And there were, you know, some of their better defensive guys were coming off the bench, the guys that were playing all the time. We're not that great of defenders. You know, Eric Hunter was a really good on the ball, you know, defensive point guard. You know, Sasha Stefanovic is in that sort of, you know, lineage of guys that you put out there because they can shoot, and you just make them a functional defender. And so you had two wings that out there that weren't necessarily great defenders, and inside you've got Edey just being large. And that makes a difference. But Williams was only such a good defender. He was just a phenomenal offensive player, you know, just really did a good job moving the basketball, passer, shooter, everything. But, you know, and could block some shots, but wasn't necessarily a great defensive guy. You know, Mason Gillis does the job, you know, as a power forward or whatever, but they just weren't a great defensive team. They didn't have great individual defensive players, and they weren't a great defensive team. But Painter really cares about defense, and so that bothered him. I mean, it really, really bothered him, and he was not afraid to say so that, you know, this I can't make them so much better about, you know, on defense. And, you know, I'm trying. I care. I want them to be a good defensive team, but they're just not a great defensive team. So you go out and you hold Gonzaga to 66 and Duke to 56. So like I haven't even looked at this box score yet. You know, what did Duke shoot in this game? 21 of 58, so 36.2%, 2 of 19 from three. And I know like Duke is more about their size now with Filipowski and Mitchell and Lively, and they just brought, you know, Whitehead is just getting into it. But Duke goes 2 of 19 from three. I mean, that's just really getting after it on defense. So yeah, they're going to be able to defend. They've got guys who obviously want to share the basketball. There is not a scorer that they have to get the ball to. And that's tough because and I don't say that to like beat up on Ivey, because Ivey was a marvel. I mean, Ivey was just a tremendous college basketball player, and I think he's going to be a tremendous NBA basketball player. But, you know, I think it's not an easy situation when you've got a perimeter guy and two bigs, and, you know, they're all guys that by general rule are guys you have to get the ball to, you know, that they need the basketball. And with this group, you have the big guy, and then all the other guards, none of the other guards have to score to be okay. Like you can get them points when you get them points. Whether it's Smith or Newman or Lawyer or whoever, they're going to get their buckets when they get their buckets, but you can get the ball to Zach and take your time. So, and just let him do it. But like, it is a team that is going to have really good chemistry. It's going to be a lot more of what Matt Painter wants it to be, and that makes them really, really dangerous. So they say they have as good a wins as they're on the board. You might find Gonzaga and Duke aren't as good as you thought they were going to be. I think that's something that's worth noting. That these might not be top 10 wins in March. When they are now. Obviously, you still circle them, and they get that bidding, and I'm sure they'll be Gonzaga and Duke will be fine, but I don't know that Gonzaga and Duke are going to be top 5 when it's all said and done.
Sure.
So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But Purdue is still really well built for the Big Ten, and they're well built for dealing with Indiana. That's going to be an interesting game going forward. You could start to look at matchups for that one, and that's going to be interesting for sure.